Hi, this is Mark. In this video, I'm going to talk about porn addiction and why it's so hard to resist, and kind of how the addiction ensues, or how what facilitates it, and also kind of how to resist it and what we can do to resist the addiction itself. So to start off, I like giving this example. Suppose there's an event frame. So we're going to create. This is the event. And we're just going to consider like movie. So this is like a movie. And what we're going to do is assume that we have like a timeline. So this is like time. And suppose that each event frame happens for a duration. So this is like the span of the events. And let's suppose like we watch the movie multiple times in succession. So this is like 1, 2, and then we go all the way dot to n. So essentially, suppose now like we're accumulating input. This is novel input that is received from the movie. So ideas, thoughts, anything that comes to mind. So this is novel input. So then what we're going to do is, if we watch the movie again, the same movie, you noticed if we go dot to the nth frame, so this is like 1, this is 2, this is n, it's going to get reduced. So what we know is that reward feedback is proportional to novelty or new stimuli. So anytime we receive new stimuli, we get fed. We get fed with more, and our dopamine receptors get charged, because we're always striving to progress in some way. Like if you eat the same food over and over, eventually your taste buds get dulled. It's like a survival mechanism, because we're always striving to move in a progressive direction, to develop, to grow, to gain new knowledge, gain new information, gain whatever feeds feeds us to, for the pursuit or survival. It's like and we're continually have a thirst for this stimuli, and it's growing and it's growing every, if we add more variables to the equation. So what's happening, how this relates to porn, is essentially based on this, we can consider, let's assume that we have like this x-y axis, and then the y-axis is this is reward. What ends up happening, let's say we're basing it on this movie, for instance. So based on the span of the event, typically the reward is cyclic. So there could be like it's starting to build up, and then it reaches a peak. There always exists some peak, and then eventually it gets depressed, starts going down. Typically, reward is always going to follow a cyclic. It should follow a cyclic pattern, just because there's like a build up to the climax, and then it gets kind of starts going down again once the event passes. Like you still recall it, but it kind of dwindles away. So we can kind of consider it that way. And I'll just kind of like draw basically multiple. These are the events. So over time, we start with the peak, and then the peak gets minimized and it approaches some limits. This is like some limit, lower limit. And essentially, so it's kind of going in this direction downward. The reward is dwindling away. And so if we keep the repetition and keep repeating, and the same thing happens like even with pornography, but what's interesting about pornography is that there is some form of like recharge. The recharge, when the body has to recharge from initial, like or if you watch it, there has to be there's some recharge period. And if you do it again before the full recharge is complete, the reward is actually going to be dampened, because the reward is proportional to the maximum. Basically, it's like the good analogy is when you're starving yourself, you're going to get a maximum reward because you've been without food for so long relative to the scenario where you continually eat frequently. So therefore, this is what causes a problem with the porn addiction. And what we can do is, how would I put this? So think of like we have a 24-hour cycle. So just think of this as a 24-hour cycle. So this is like what ends up happening is we have the lightness and then the darkness. So we're going to focus on the span here, and we're just going to assume this is like sleep. So we're focusing on this span, and suppose that porn gets watched at like a frequency of, so this is like a frequency. This is like when it's occurring 3 times per day. So 3 times per cycle. Because this, we're going to include this one cycle. So now that this occurs, what we can do is if we take this span, and again, this is going to be like a, we're going to do like, this is reward. So basically, this is going to be right here. It's going to be proportional. So this is like the distance. So there's going to be a feedback. And suppose it just you get full recharge, so we're going to consider like the same, just for generally it should get, dampened if the recharge hasn't been complete. But if it's an addiction, what ends up happening is your body adjusts to it, and it actually learns to recharge at a faster, like it just adjusts. But basically this is a reward signaling. So I like to make this analogous to like an atomic, almost like if you think of an atom and a nucleus, there are electrons surrounding the atom, and there's a force that's being directed, and it's proportional to the mass. Now think of this, instead of thinking this is typically mass, as mass, or it's a dense object. So this is a nucleus. This is a nucleus. So now just consider this scenario where this is reward. And basically, so if this is a reward, and say this is a cycle, so this is a 360 degree, so this is a, so basically this is 0, 90, 180, 270. So say this is a cycle of a day. A day is 360 degrees, but we're going to consider from 0 to 180. We're going to consider from 0 to 180. So basically now we're considering the force. We're doing it 3 times per day. So there's a inward force proportional to the reward. This is what builds the addiction. The stronger the force, the harder to resist. So based on this vector, if the force is greater during that period, we're going to basically want to do it. It's going to be like, just like when you sleep at the same time every single day. Typically it's a range. So like, so typically if you're within a constricted range and you sleep in a similar time, you're going to wake up at the, and you're going to get acclimated to that. Same with food. If you eat and you build a routine, you get adjusted to that. It's like a force. You want to eat during those times. And then same with reward. If you do like pornography in this case at certain times, it's a feedback that you received. If you stop doing it, if you abruptly stop, basically it's going to create this inward, that force is going to naturally draw you in that direction towards the addiction. So this is a big problem, and I think the best way really to, in terms of quitting, for quitting, so you need willpower, strong mindset, you need to know about, understand consequences. And these are like forces that destroy the negative pole. And eventually, over time, so like time after quitting. So so now so now what ends up happening is this reward actually gets because this is a reward that's proportional to the porn. This is a reward that is received from porn. So basically, reward from it gets centered. So basically, now the forces or really get or we're gonna do 180. So that's 0. So forces get much smaller. So basically, yeah, just think of the vector gets very small. So therefore, it's much easier to quit. And essentially, you need to replace activity. Like this could be like exercise, work, etc. So, there's many different avenues that, help quit this addiction, and basically understanding consequences like this case would be depression, because it's been shown and proven that porn addiction reinforces depression, whether because it changes your mindset, it causes you to become go into mental fog, it reduces the reward signaling over time, it gets dampened for multiple basically desensitization creates that problem. And so, and of course willpower is very, it's a force that helps resist it. And what else? So yeah, it's just there's many different things that can help, but really it's just about understanding that, what porn addiction, why it's so detrimental towards health and so forth. And it really, we need to find, because our predecessors didn't have the internet, they didn't have all these access to such degree. So basically it's based on the frequency. We're exposed to more pathways that lead us in this direction and cause a temptation. So really mitigating and removing that, and it's okay to get online and so forth, but when doing so, it's better to do it constructively and not waste time and energy on something that just kind of saps energy over time and so forth. So really, it's about finding ways to balance the time that is spent in a technological world. Working, go outside, take a road trip, be in nature, so forth. Go on a work, exercise outside, walk, run, and read books, write, do other things, work, get a job, find like a new career path, so forth. There's many different pathways, and that ultimately rebuilds everything, and then the desensitization or the sensitivity will start increasing again, and therefore the reward. It's just like when you stop eating for a while and you're so hungry, it gives you such a strong feedback, and it's just amazing. And that's the same thing when you're always sabotaging your receptors and so forth and desensitizing, it kind of gets dampened, and then when you don't even want to have sex or anything, and that kind of gets rid of that poses a problem. So this is just my take on things. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.